I call Jan Logie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to speak on this, the third reading of the Taxation, Kiwisaver, Homestart and Remedial Matters Bill, which the Green Party is supporting. We're supporting it because it might just be better than nothing. We're not quite sure, but we're taking the chance that it might just be. Most reasonable thinking New Zealanders recognise we've got a bit of a problem with housing affordability and quality and tenure in New Zealand. Many, in fact, call it a crisis. And I've had concerns about this crisis raised with me personally, everywhere from Invercargill to Whangarei, and I happen to have heard some stories around Northland about concerns of housing as well. And of course, we most often hear about the problems in Auckland and Christchurch. And there is a crisis. In 1970, the average age of first home purchase in New Zealand was just 25. And in 2013, it's estimated to be either 34 or 36 years of age. And we now have the lowest rates of home ownership in New Zealand since 1951. And with more than 35% of people in this country renting. The median house price is over $380,000 and significantly almost double that in Auckland. Yet the median family can only afford to service a mortgage of $250,000 to $300,000, and they're likely to only have a few $1,000s in the bank. It's estimated that only 5% of the new builds, the few of them that we've been hearing about, are now affordable. And this is compared to 35% of all new builds in 1960 being affordable houses. So the average cost of a house in Auckland is now $621,800. And the rate of housing inflation in Auckland is $1,700 a week. And to meet the LVR 20% deposit is around $120,000. So it makes it unaffordable for many who would previously have bought only a few decades ago. Increasingly, families are spending their lives paying someone else's mortgage, spending their money towards somebody else's accrual of wealth. And we know that the answer from this government will do nothing to help this. It will do nothing to improve people's ability to pay off their mortgage. It will do nothing to help people who can't afford Kiwisaver contributions in the first place. It won't help housing affordability. In fact, there are the views of some that it will make it worse. And it won't help people save for retirement. I will get to our plan. Treasury suggests that it will just enable people who are already likely to be able to buy to just do it a bit quicker. And it risks increasing demand in a supply-constrained market. Now, we've heard huge amounts of hyperbole from this government about how seriously they're taking this housing problem, even though their ministers can't quite bring themselves to suggest it's a crisis. Though perhaps more in touch backbenchers from that side of the House, I have heard acknowledged that it may be a crisis. So I would just like to take this opportunity to contrast the government's policies that's contained within this bill, which will allow people to use the $521 a year of tax credits in their Kiwisaver account towards a first home deposit, and contrast that with our policy of progressive home ownership, and let the Speaker and the public decide which policy would be more effective at addressing the housing crisis and low rates of home ownership. Now, the Green Party recognises the housing crisis And housing is central to our vision of a fair, sustainable and prosperous society. Safe and secure, sustainable housing is fundamental to health and well-being of families and communities and our economy. All New Zealanders have a right to warm, safe, stable and healthy homes. And we have a comprehensive policy to address all of those concerns, but I'd specifically today like to contrast the policy contained in this bill with our progressive ownership policy. Our progressive ownership program will provide a pathway to home ownership for families who don't have a deposit or income for a commercial mortgage. So it will work by the Crown, ideally along with partners in local government, iwi and the community sector, building affordable homes worth, say, around $300,000 on average. And we do understand that while land prices might be high, the possibility of intensification enables us to leverage off that and bring the costs down. It would build a modern environmental standards, make efficient use of land with modern urban form well served by public transport, because we've read the research that shows building out on the fringes, not connected to public transport, has the highest rates of mortgagee sales. Because as petrol prices go up, people become more vulnerable and can't pay off their mortgages anymore. So people can build healthy communities and cheaply and easily get around. Families will enter into contracts with the Crown for these houses. Under these agreements, the Crown will initially own all the equity in the house, and families will pay a basic payment to cover the Crown's cost of capital, say $200 a week on a $300,000 house at the government bond rate of 3.5%, because our government has access to cheap loans in a way that the average individual through a bank does not. And then the people buying in the houses will be able to make additional variable purchases of equity in the property from the Crown at the value of the house when the agreement was signed. So basically that's just saying when you've got a bit more money, you pay a bit more, and then you start to increase ownership of that house until you own it. And the government is no worse off, and the government has the money that it first invested into that house to put into another house, to enable another family to purchase their own house. And if that family starts to struggle and can't meet those rates of repayment, then it just pulls it back down to the $200 a week to cover the Crown's capital investment. It recognises the reality of struggle for so many of our families, and it provides a solution where families can start to accrue wealth, and if their situation starts to improve, then actually they can take the equity they have in that house out and use it towards a more expensive house, say, in the private market. And the government is no worse off. The Crown has the same investment that it had to begin with, and that family is able to move ahead at their own pace. And they're no longer feeding the wealth of the increasingly small number of investors who own an increasing number of the properties in this house. Now, in this country. Now, I really ask this House to consider the extra $521 a year that this bill in front of the House at the moment would provide to people who already have the money to put into Kiwisaver to be able to save for that first home deposit. What will that really do to help people get into housing in Auckland or into other parts of the country where people are struggling, compared to using the resources that we have as a state to build and to help people pay off houses at a rate they can manage, that meets the fact that their situation may change. And I really think, to put it bluntly, it's a no-brainer. Nobody loses in this option. And what we gain as a country is strong, secure communities where children are able to go to the same school and improve their learning, and we're all much better off. And sadly, this bill does nothing.